good day to brew, baby? What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy, back with Hometown Commander. We are back for another episode of Millzy Brews, the show where I prepare my first take deck decks for you. And today we are doing the face commander from the other Phyrexia all-be-one precon, Neyali Sun's Vanguard. Red, white, Boros, tokens, and equipment. This deck was actually a lot more than I expected it to be, but before we get into it, drop me a like if you want to see more Commander content. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think of the precons? What do you think of this precon? I thought this precon had a lot of really cool reprints in it. Thought I had decent value. And drop me a subscribe if you want to see some more Commander content. Baby, let's do it. Let's look at Neyali Sun's Vanguard. A very interesting commander in its own right. 2 red-white for 3/3. Tagging tokens you control have double strike. That's going to be pretty useful. We'll get to that in a second. Whenever one or more tokens you control attack a player, exile the top card of your library. During any turn you attack with a token, you may play that card. Cool about this part about this text, because it says play and not cast, we can actually get lands off the top, and that could be useful as well. So what are we trying to do? I think it's pretty obvious that we're trying to attack with tokens, but the rebels in Phyrexia all-be-one kind of revolve around this Mirrodin mechanic. A mechanic kind of like we've seen on other cards where it comes in, it makes a token and attaches itself to it. Kemba's Banner is probably one of the better ones of these. It says, when it enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 rebel creature token and attaches to it, and that creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control. Or we could equip it for 2 and a white. What I've tried to do with this deck is pretty much halfway marry it between equipment and tokens. And the reason is because I think the tokens are exactly what Neyali wants to do. But I also think on the equipment side, there are plenty of equipment that will make creatures better. There's plenty of creatures that can make our regular creatures hit harder. But there are so many of these equipment strategies that make them so cheap to equip for free. There's a lot of these really random things that equipment can do. And so I think we kind of get to marry them perfectly between the tokens and the equipment. So like all my deck decks, I like to start with the lands. Went and just pulled the precon up a little bit in lands. A lot of the lands are the same. We just added a few more dual lands. Spectator Seating, Sundown Pass, Temple of Triumph was in the deck. Battlefield Forge, Native Edge Pathway, Clifftop Retreat. Urza's Saga are probably the pricier of the lands we added, but it's because it does get enough of our artifacts that it becomes worth it. Added the Field Passage so we can get our choice if needed. And then added the Axe God Armory because we can go ahead and get a artifact or an enchantment or an equipment or aura if need be, which isn't a bad ability. Playing Sunhome and Slayer Stronghold. So I think Slayer Stronghold came in the precon. I added Sunhome. Just these really cool utility lands that help in combat at Den of the Bugbear as well, because it makes a token when you attack. So that's pretty helpful. Like I said, a lot of the deck is built around pretty much half equipment, half tokens. So for our enchantments, you'll notice Anointed Procession doubling up those tokens. Cathar's Crusade, pretty classic for white go wide decks as a top end to get you to win the game. Terminator Duration, beginning of combat, we populate and that token gets haste. This is going to be great because remember, Neyali gives all of our attacking tokens double strikes depending on what we choose. This can give you value. Fighter class, when it comes in, gets this as equipment and it goes up in the levels, gets a little bit better for the equipment side of things, but we have Intangible Virtue to give all of our tokens vigilance, which is helpful. Luminarch Ascension, one of my single favorite token producers. If you can get past the 4 turns of not getting hit by any opponents, for 2 mana we get a 4/4 Angel, and we don't even mind dumping mana in there. Once we get some of these creatures and cards done that start equipping our things for free, Luminarch Ascension is great. Outlaw's Merriment seems really fun. Coming in, giving a random assortment of tokens, and this is great, especially when we add Neyali's double strike to it. Rabble Rousing, every time we attack, we get that many 1/1 tokens. Those don't come in tapped at attacking, but it's kind of cool because they can act as blockers. Roar of Resistance, the new card that looks really good. Creature tokens you control have haste, and then whenever 1 or more creatures attack, you can pay 1 and a red. If you do, creatures attacking your opponent or planes under control get +2/+0 until end turn. This is great because if we already have that double strike off of Neyali, we can now pump them up in the middle of combat. And the best part is It's just going to make blocking even harder when they have double strike. Sigarda's Aid, pretty much a classic equipment card, letting us cast equipment spells as if they had flash, and then whenever one comes in, we can attach it to a creature for free. Sigarda's Aid is one of probably the best enchantments in our deck, and Smothering Tide to help smooth out that mana. I think most white decks should be playing Smothering Tide at this point, especially when we have a couple artifact synergies with cards like Nettle Assist that care about how many artifacts we have. Most of our cards care about how many creatures we have, but Nettle Assist just seems free when we have this giant, massive equipment that we want to be using. Pardon me. For mana, we have Arcane Signet, Boros Signet, Fellwar Stone. I think most of the time you're going to be running into a red or white deck at your table, so you should be able to use the Fellwar Stone to a pretty high degree of use. Oketra's Monument to reduce those creature spells and get us a 1/1 whenever we cast creature spells. Soul Ring, and Talisman of Conviction. As far as our equipment go, Blackblade, although we're not going to have a ton of lands, I still think Blackblade is worth it, especially when we can equip it for free. Dolmen Gate, protects all of our attacking creatures. It would prevent all damage to be dealt to them. This makes attacking with our tokens more than free and worth it every time. Ember Cleave, giving the creature double strike and trample. Can also be flashed in the middle of combat, which is pretty great. Glimmer Lens comes in and makes one of those 2/2s. It says whenever a equipped creature and at least one other creature attack, draw a card. This is great. It's just going to help us get cards into our hand. Not my favorite of these for Mirrodin equipments, but I think this one's pretty good. Hammer of Nizan, one of the equipment classics. When it comes in, when it or another equipment enters battlefield under control, you may attach that equipment to target creature you control, and the creature has +2/+0 and it's indestructible. This is great because it kind of is another of these Sigarda's Aid effect where we're going to always make sure that our equipment are getting attached up. Hexplate Wallbreaker, none of these Mirrodin ones, but it says whenever it attacks, if it's the first combat, untap each attacking creature. That's this phase. There's an additional combat phase. This is great because this is going to give us that double combat every turn cycle, which is great. That's going to help us push forward for more damage. Horn of Valhalla, one of my favorites from Hero Legends 2, makes a bunch of tokens on the front half, which is kind of what we already want to do anyway, and then it comes down and gives the same Kemba's Banner effect for +1/+1 for each creature we control. Not each token we control, each creature we control. That's important. Xenon Warhammer gives us +3/+0 trample and lifelink. With that double strike from Neyali, this is going to be very tough to deal with. Gain us a ton of life. Maul the Skyclaves, +2/+2 flying in first strike. This one actually will auto attach when it comes in. So if we don't have any of those cards down, this one actually auto attaches. And Nettlesis, like talked before, this makes a germ token and then attaches to it. So it's kind of like the Mirrodin cards, but a little bit different. But gets +1/+1 for each artifact we control or enchantment we control. We're going to be playing a couple enchantments. We're going to be playing a good amount of artifacts, so I think Nettlesis will always come down and be a pretty big thing. And then if we want to threaten commander damage, we can move this over in the alley. There's plenty of other places we could make Nettlesis a part of. Shadow Spear, probably one of my favorite equipment that exists. +1/+1 trample and lifelink. Again, great with that double strike, but just helps hit over and give us good abilities. Sunforger, a classic in these Boros equipment decks. For red and a white, you can unattach it, search your library for a red or white instant card with mana value 4 or less, and pay it without paying its mana cost. Shuffle your library. Sunforger is great because it could go get all of our protection spells. It get so many things, and I think you always got to be careful when you're sitting on a commander table and someone has Sunforger because you never know exactly what they're going to get. Is it Fairy's Protection? Is it Flawless Maneuver? There's so many things that Sunforger can go get. It can go get removal. It could go get although it'd be pretty, a waste of equipping. But you go get Swords Plowshares or Path to Exile to respond to a combo that's happening. You can go get Boros Charm. These go wide protection spells. I think there's plenty of things that we can get with Sunforger, and I think Sunforger is probably one of our top equipments for that reason. Sword of Vengeance, +2/+0, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, word soup, and I love it. Just helps out on all of our creatures. Sword of the Animus is going to get us a basic land every time the equipped creature attacks. That's great because we don't have a ton of ramp anyway, and we're trying our best to have some card draw, but we can't have a ton of it. And so I think Sword of the Animus kind of helps us out with that. And then one of my favorite new equipment in the Reaver Cleaver, +1/+1, and then whenever in trample, whenever it deals damage to a player or planeswalker, create that many treasure tokens. The treasure is just going to help us get more things out, but I think it's also just going to help us leave mana up, or for this case of this Nettlesis, pump the amount of artifacts we have up to make it even harder to deal with. Coming into the spells, you'll note that honestly, a lot of our spells are really just protection and search and token production, right? Because we want tokens. Burrow's Charm, Flawless Maneuver, Grand Crescendo, which has the option to make us tokens if we want to. Otherwise, it just gives our creatures indestructible. Are there for protection. Clever Concealment, the new card in this precon, and one of my favorite new cards from the new commander set, lets you convoke to cast it, so we could tap all of those untapped creatures or tokens we have to help cast Clever Concealment and phase any number of target non-land permanents we control until our next turn. This is going to help us get around borders, thing like that. The thing I really like about Clever Concealment is we can cast it off of Sunforger, and that's pretty cool as well. Deflecting Palm, Boros staple in these combat decks to stop one of those big attacks coming at you and reflect the damage back to its controller. And that's pretty great in itself. Call the Copper Coats can make us a ton of tokens, so can Secure the Waste. They're in here just to help us get some of that token production out as well. I really like trying to get as much into Grand Crescendo as I can, not just doing it for double white, but trying to put some mana into it to get the tokens out. And then for removal, Generous Gift to anything, Path, and Swords to hit creatures. And then Wear and Tear can hit artifacts or enchantments. Pretty I think Wear and Tear is more of an auto-include in most Boros decks because it's so cheap anyway, and paying 3 mana to get rid of 2 things instead of just 1, like with a Generous Gift, is just well worth it. Remember, with the meld cards with Wear and Tear, you have to cast, if you want both of them, you have to cast them both at the same time, and you have to have legal targets when you cast them. But otherwise, you just pick a side and you cast it. And I think it's still a net positive because it has so much utility when you have both of them as opposed to just one of them. For sorcerers, we have the new card, Gold Warden's Gambit. 6 red, but it costs 1 less for each equipment we control, which is pretty cool because we're going to try to play a ton of them. It says create 5 2/2 red rebel creature tokens. They gain haste for each of those tokens. You may attach equipment you control to it. This is great because depending on what equipment we have or depending on what we have on board, we can kind of localize all of our equipment into one place and get a good attack. Hour of Reckoning, destroy all non-token creatures. And we can convoke for this with all of our tokens, or all of our creatures. This is great to just wipe the board, especially if we have a ton of tokens. We can just take our advantage. We're also playing Martial Coup, which does something very similar, makes X creature tokens. If X is 5 or more, we destroy all other creatures. Hopefully we can use this as a one-sided board wipe. Some of our equipment give indestructible, so the hope is that we put those on our non-token creatures, do something like this, nuke the entire board besides those tokens, and then we stay up and alive and we're ahead of our opponents. Indulge, a card that came out in the Cabaret precon that I really like for token decks. Whenever a creature you control attacks this turn, create a 1/1 citizen creature token that's tapped and attacking. And the cool part about Neyali's ability is that token doesn't have to declare an attack to get double strike. It'll just come in with double strike. And then the XX side says create a treasure token for each creature you control that dealt damage to combat damage to a player this turn. And that's great because the wider we are, the more tokens we get out of the process. Jessica's Will, netting us all that red mana and potentially exiling us to the top 3. Jessica's Will is a staple at this point, and it does a very good job at that. Open the armory to go get our choice of an aura or equipment, which is pretty great. We're not playing any auras, but we're playing a lot of equipments, and I think getting the one at the right time is here. If you have the budget upgrade, go ahead and throw the Steel Shaper's Gift, throw the Enlightened Tutor in there. I didn't for this one because I wanted to try to keep the cost a little bit further down on this deck since we're doing the precon kind of discussions, but I think Steel Shaper's Gift and Enlightened Tutor definitely deserve a spot in this deck to get you those equipment you want right away. And then Ceram's Expertise, making us 3/1/1 servos, but it allows us to play a card with CMC 3 or less from our hand without paying its cost. And I think this is going to hit most of our equipment, a lot of our creatures. I think this is just a good card, and it plays both. It's not just getting tokens, it's also getting a card for free. So we can kind of get, if you think about it, if we play a card with CMC 3 or mana value 3, we're getting 7 mana worth of cards for just 4 mana. So Ceram's Expertise is really great for that. As far as the creatures go, this is me trying to take a mix of tokens and equipment. The Boros color, red-white, is absolutely jam-packed full of commanders that care about equipment and do great things for equipment. So what I tried my best to do is try to hand-pick them. I still wanted to play Lothari Sun's Glory, the secondary face commander, because I think it still has good abilities, and I like that it gives you every time it attacks, it gets a counter, and then it's giving you more and more of these 2/2s that are tapped and attacking each time you attack with it. I think that's well worth it for its cost. But as far as the token producers, we got Adeline going to make a token for each of our opponents when we're attacking. Goblin Rabble Master going to make a goblin each turn. All goblins have to attack. All of our other goblin tokens have to attack, or other goblins have to attack if able. But whenever it attacks, it gets +1/+1, +1/+0 for each goblin we control. We're playing Krenko. Whenever it attacks, we're going to make a bunch of tokens. And Legion War Boss, kind of similar to Rabble Master, where it makes a goblin and that goblin has to attack. I think these 4 will add some good token production to our lineup. We're playing Mondrak from the new set to, again, double the amount of tokens we're making, just like with that Anointed Procession. We want to make sure that any of these abilities are giving us lots of tokens, for especially when we're not going to have a ton of extra mana floating around. In our green-white counterpart token decks, we have lots of mana lying around, right? They can make tokens all day, every day, and they don't really care about the mana that's involved. But I think for a Boros deck like this, we want these token doublers. We want these things that give us incremental tokens every turn, because we're going to have to spend more of our mana to get it. Akiri, whenever you attack a player with one or more equipped creatures, draw a card, and then for a white, you can unattach an equipment from a creature you control. If you do, tap that creature and it gets indestructible. So this is some protection for our equipped creatures. Golden Knight Commander, whenever a creature enters battlefield under your control, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. This works out really well with rabble rousing, because if you attack with enough creatures, let's say we attack with 6 or 7 creatures with Golden Knight Commander out, those 6 or 7 1/1s come in, and now all of our creatures get a flat +7/+7, and now they're even harder to block. So Golden Knight Commander is well worth the 4 mana, because I think it more often than not just makes our attacks even better. Halvar got a battle. Creatures you control that are enchanted or equipped have double strike. This is in here as kind of like a secondary commander option. We want to make sure that all of our equipped creatures still are going to hit through, even if they're not tokens. Remember, because Neyali only gives that double strike to tokens and doesn't care about them being equipped. But this is going to come down and give all of our equipped things double strike. That's great, because it's going to make those equipments like... it's going to make those equipments like the hammer and the Zon and things like that hard pump up a creature's power hit even harder, because they hit twice. And at the beginning of each combat, not just your combat, each combat, you can attach an equipment or attach to a creature you control to another creature you control. And that's great, because we can kind of move them around without paying their cost. And it's kind of pseudo-instant speed if you think about it, because it's at that start of combat. Erois, one of the best creatures in our deck, gives all of our creatures flat menace, which makes them even harder to block, prevents all damage to be dealt to attacking creatures you control. So this is kind of another copy of that Dolmen Gate style effect that I think is going to be really important, especially when we start swinging with tokens. And then once it becomes a creature, it's a 7/4 beater that just becomes very tough to block. Cole the Forge Master. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, if it was enchanted or equipped, return it to its owner's hand. This is great, because that means if we have Cole out, we try to get equipment on all these non-token creatures. That way, when they get died or we have a board wipe or anything like that, we can bring them back to our hand. And then creature tokens you control that are enchanted or equipped get +1/+1. So again, just another buff for our tokens. Prava of the Steel Legion, one of the best Anthem effects we have for tokens in the deck. As long as it's your turn, creature tokens get +1/+4. That makes attacking with them so much easier. And then for 4 mana, we can make a soldier. Cheaper ways to make mana tokens, but I think in the late game, if we have so much extra mana, Prava's not a bad option to dump mana into. Pure Steel Paladin, whenever equipment enters the battlefield under control, we can draw a card, and then they attach for 0 as long as we have 3 or more artifacts, which is not going to be very hard in this deck. We have a lot of artifacts. And then Silverwing Squadron, one of my favorite humans that we get to play in the deck. Its power toughness is equal to the number of creatures we control. So that's going to get bigger and bigger, right, as we're making more tokens. And whenever it attacks, create a number of 2/2 white knight creature tokens with vigilance equal to the number of opponents you have. So those don't come in tapped and attacking, but basically we're going to get however number of opponents we have, we're going to get that many 2/2s, and those will be either ready to block after we take our big attack, or they're going to be able to do other things depending on what we have as far as that. And then we're just running one Planeswalker, because I think Nahiri kind of fits the deck pretty well. Her +1 makes you a token, and then you can attach an equipment to it. -2, look at the top 6. You can reveal a warrior equipment and put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom. And then the -3, Deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to twice the number of equipment you control. I just think that every single ability on this Neyali fits what we're trying to do. The +1's great because it just makes us another token, which we want anyway. The -2 is great because it can dig us a little bit if we need to get a equipment or something like that into our hand. We're not playing a ton of warriors, although we do have a couple, but that's not really what we're worried about. I think more often than not, we're looking for that equipment off the top. And then the -3 if we have a ton of equipments out that deals the damage. Wrapping up, I think this is a deck that seems really fun. I think this is probably the way I would probably lean towards building Boros equipment. As much as I like equipment decks, I think they tend to be very flash in the panty, very Voltron. And I think this deck is fun because you kind of get to go wide and you get to get those equipment down. And I think it leads you to a better play pattern. The one thing I didn't consider for the deck that I think if this is a deck that interests you, you should take a look at are the equipment creatures with reconfigure from Kamigawa. Like Lizard's Blades might be a decent card for something like this. I don't know. I thought there were other cards that, when we're keeping the tokens in mind, fit the slots better than Lizard's Blades did. But I think it could fit the slot. If you're going to spin this more towards equipment, I think that would make more sense. But I think with Neyali, I think she perfectly pays us off playing both tokens and equipment. And so I want to kind of make sure that we're keeping kind of both sides of the deck here, because I think they do fit really well together, especially with all these new Mirrodin equipment. The other thing I realized is I don't know that I looked at any of the Mirrodin equipment from the set. I think there is a couple in the set, so maybe that's something else to look into as far as upgrading. My problem with the equipment was there's so many of these classic equipment cards like Hammer of Nizan and Shadow Spear and Sunforger and those that I needed to fit in and I wanted to really work, that I didn't really go looking for those equipment because I felt like I was already going to have a problem selecting the equipment as it was, and I didn't want to completely lose these Mirrodin equipment cards because they actually make us tokens along with. That's one of the big reasons I put Nettle Cyst in here, was because it comes down with a token, and so it still kind of fits our half token aesthetic. What do you guys think of Neyali? The list is going to be down in the description, so you can take a look at it. Please use it however you'd like. That's the goal of Millzy Brews, is for you to take these brews, enjoy them for yourself, do what you want with them. And I think this precon is pretty worth the money. I thought it had some good reprints in it. It had some good stuff in it. Definitely not my precon of choice. Next week, like I said, we're going to take a look at Vishgraz, who's probably my pick of these four commander deck commanders, and then next week we're going to look at Othari as well, taking a look at what we can do with it to double up, to build a deck around it. It's probably not my choice over Neyali, but I want to be fair and see what I can do with Othari to make it a little more fun, whether it's putting some of the Phoenix Travel stuff in there or just seeing if we can make a decent deck out of it as well. But thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, let me know what you think down in the comments, and I will catch you next time.